Malefor, the Dark Master, the Dragon of Prophecy, becoming corrupt, the Destroyer of Worlds, didn't quite stick the landing. The Legend of Spyro is Spyro's second trilogy, and while it did not reach the heights of popularity like the first trilogy, it's still considered as a pretty good trilogy to play through. The main bad guy was none other than Malefor, another purple dragon who decided to destroy the world. And I have issues, mostly because he was brilliantly set up, only to have tomfoolery happen in the third act, and the writers just bum fumbled it. Let's talk about it.
Whoa!
What's up, guys? Canadian Guy here, and let's start with a quick recap of our edgy, angry purple dragon. In this timeline of Spyro, there was a prophecy that was told about purple dragons. While each dragon can master a single element, purple dragons can master more than one. However, there's only one that comes every 10 generations, and their job is to lead the dragons into a brand new age. Fast forward and poof, a purple egg appears and hatches into Malefor. At first, Malefor was very much like every other dragon, but then he began to master different elements. The dragon elders began to basically borderline worship the young dragon by erecting statues and constantly tutoring him and protecting him. One day, for no inexplicable reason that anyone could ever figure out, it began to kinda get to his head, and soon the thirst for knowledge from Malefor became a thirst for power. Eventually, it got so bad, the dragon elders decided to outcast him. At some point, it's unclear if this was before or after he was cast out, Malefor learned of a new power called Aether. Aether is essentially a primal and ancient force in this world. To surmise it quickly, because this is a deep rabbit hole, imagine dragons breathing plasma laser energy. But there is also a dark side to Aether, simply named Dark Aether, and Malefor began to be corrupted by it. As he learned and dabbled in this new power, he began to dwell more and more about now being an outcast. His anger and his despair grew so powerful that one day he had the world's biggest tantrum and he split a mountain into two with nothing but sheer dark aether powered rage. This combination of despair and corruption also created the Well of Souls in the center of this now split mountain, now called the Mountain of Malefor. Eventually, he rallied an army of literal apes and went to war with the dragon elders. And after many years of battle, the dragons finally defeated Malefor. Now, somehow, we're not sure how, the dragons concocted a way to actually split Malefor into two: his essence and his soul. His essence was trapped away behind a portal into a dimension of convexity, and his soul was placed actually in the Well of Souls. However, Malefor still had some form of influence and control in the actual world. How? Reasons. Anyway, years later, a new clutch of eggs in the Year of the Dragon came along, and surprise, another purple egg showed up. So Malefor sends his army of apes to smash all the eggs, steal one egg, and destroy this purple egg that would bring the next purple dragon. Ignitus takes the purple egg and sends it down the river to a family of dragonflies, and bing bong, Spyro is born. Years later, a dragon named Cinder, which was from the egg that was actually stolen from the temple from the apes, and after years of torture and, being magically influenced by Malefor and Gaul, she began to destroy everything, stating that she served the Dark Master, aka Malefor. So Spyro goes on an adventure to find his new OP powers and to stop Cinder. He stops her at the portal where Malefor's essence was, but was too late, and Cinder still sets Malefor's essence free. Then in the second game, there is an event called the Eternal Night, which essentially was a time when the veil between life and death was at its thinnest in this world. And this is the most opportune time that Malefor could actually return, now that his essence was released. And that's exactly what happened. Then we get to Dawn of the Dragon, where every single one of Malefor's plans comes together no matter how hard Spyro and Cinder try. They fight, the World Destroyer finishes its tasks, they plummet into a volcano, Malefor declares he's eternal, and then he gets Terminator 2'd into a crystal. Then Spyro, with the power of anime and friendship, stops the world from blowing up. The end. Okay, so some of you might be wondering, what was that crystal that Malefor got pulled into? We'll get to that later. Now here's the thing. Malefor was introduced perfectly in A New Beginning. The looming threat, the Dark Master, the Palpatine to Darth Cinder. Then they did a decent job expanding on him in the Eternal Night. And then when it's time for the grand reveal, the mark is just missed at every point. Let's start with the first conversation Malefor has in person with Spyro. A few of the rules that we have learned of the world before we got there was 1, a new purple dragon is born every 10 generations to bring the dragons to a new age, and 2, Malefor was the first purple dragon. Right away, Malefor begins the typical villain monologuing about how great their plans are and how inevitable they are, while throwing in some additional lore that is either lies or twists on the truth that we have already established. Like how Malefor wasn't the first purple dragon, and that there have been many before him. But then he says that the purpose of the purple dragon is to destroy the world? And if you watch how Malefor actually almost achieves this, he doesn't mean like, oh, everything dies on the world. No. I mean total, complete planetary destruction. Like blowing it all to bits. Okay, so if Spyro used his head for longer than 5 seconds, he'd think, if there have been many purple dragons before us and their purpose is to destroy the world, why is the world still here? Either purple dragons are bad at their jobs, the prophecy got it really wrong, or he lying. Also, the points that Malefor makes, Spyro just kind of ignores them and just says no and just moves on. And we're never really given clarity after the fact. It would have been nice to have a wise, old, nurturing dragon to teach Spyro after the fact that what he said was oh wait, he died. That's right, yeah. Okay, well. So we finished the game, and there is no further explanation clarifying Malefor's statements. We finished not knowing how much of what Malefor said is true, a lie, or a stretch of the truth, and that bothers me. But there's something else that actually bothers me even more. Every aspect of Malefor's plan essentially went off without a hitch. Get his essence free from another dimension? Check. Be revived by the Eternal Night from the Well of Souls? Check. Become eternal? Check. Summon the World Destroyer? Check. Get the Destroyer to make the Belt of Fire to blow up the world? Check. Have the world literally explode? Check. Nearly every aspect of his plan was achieved. Now some might say, oh, well, he planned to destroy Spyro as an egg and that failed. Yeah, sure. But Spyro technically failed every single one of his missions. He stopped Cinder, but he didn't stop her from releasing Malefor's essence. He didn't stop Malefor from being brought back via the Eternal Night. He didn't stop the World Destroyer, and technically speaking, he wasn't even the one who destroyed Malefor. So when you have a villain that essentially is so powerful, have the perfect plan, and then execute it perfectly and introduce no story mechanic for there to be a weakness to that plan, or for the main character to create a weakness earlier in that said story, the writers then paint themselves into a corner because now they've built an unstoppable villain for the player to fear with no logical aspect for the hero to overcome and beat them. There's no way for the hero to win. But here's the thing. These types of stories and endings do actually exist. Sometimes the bad guys are like an inevitable tide. If Dawn of the Dragon actually ended in a tragedy, like Malefor wins, that could have been really interesting and a really compelling story. But due to the nature of the IP and of course audience, these stories have to end in a happily ever after. So what happens when writers paint themselves in the corner for a story and the hero needs to win but they can't figure out how because they made their villain way too powerful? They bring out what we like to call the Deus Ex Machina. Now, some of you may be confused. What is that? I thought Deus Ex was a sci-fi video game. Well, let me quickly explain. Spyro, Cinder, and Malefor fall into a volcano. Malefor announces that he is eternal and cannot be defeated, and that Spyro and Cinder's efforts are for naught. All of a sudden, they land on a giant purple crystal, and then purple dragon spirits just kind of pop out and begin to attack Malefor. He is then dragged into the crystal and is considered as defeated. Now, let me ask you, do you know what that crystal was? That was actually the world's core, essentially the heart of the world. These spirit dragons were the dragon ancestors. Now, let me ask you something. When was the world core introduced at any point of this game? Where was it mentioned? At any point? Or how about in any of the Legend of Spyro games? Was it mentioned by Ignitus, the Dragon Elders, the Chronicler with all of his books? No. It just shows up out of the blue and conveniently is the exact thing that destroys the unstoppable villain. Also, did we know that the ancestors were sitting in the middle of the world, just twiddling their dragon thumbs and waiting till the last second to help? No, that wasn't mentioned and never talked about at all. Now that we know that, let me give you the definition of the Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Machina, Latin for God from the Machine, is a plot device where an unsolvable, seemingly hopeless problem is suddenly and unexpectedly resolved by an abrupt, contrived intervention. It feels artificial, often used when writers cannot find a logical way to end a story. Does that not fit what happens here in Dawn of the Dragon? To a capital T. The worst part is, this story plot could have been easily fixed with foreshadowing. Early in the game, Ignitus could have told Spyro that when the time is right, he could call upon the ancestors when he needed help, and that the heart of the world beats as one with Spyro's. Maybe when Spyro got in trouble sometimes, he actually would try to call upon the help of the ancestors once or twice and actually would fail. So that when Spyro lands on the heart and he realizes what it is, you have this epic scene where he calls upon the power of the ancestors for a third and final time. There's a moment of silence, a beat, and then he succeeds and they come to his aid. Bingo! The ending is no longer a Deus Ex Machina and obviously makes it more fulfilling for everyone playing the game. This could have all been fixed with a few lines of dialogue placed earlier in the game. Speaking of dialogue, can we talk about Malefor's voice? Listen, they brought in Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill. Luke Skywalker, the voice for the Joker and nearly all the games, cartoons, movies, etc. to voice Malefor. Malefor! That's brilliant! What an amazing casting choice. A+. But when you meet Malefor for the first time, he sounds like this.
At long last, my guests have arrived. Please, come in. Such determination here.
How do you cast Mark Hamill, spend all of that money for his time and his talent, and that is how you do his voice? Here's the thing. Closed captions aren't even optional here. You need them to understand what he's saying. Just listen to a different clip.
I'm trying to destroy the world, but I'm dummy thick, and the clap of my gems keeps alerting those dragons.
Okay. He never said that. But wanna know what's wild? That was my voice. And if someone who is not a voice actor can get kinda close to what Mark Hamill sounded like, that kind of tells you how bad they ruined and fried his voice with a bunch of artificial filters. So even in the voice acting department, they missed on Malefor's reveal. If you've gotten to this point of this video and think, oh, CG hates Legend of Spyro, oh, CG hates Malefor. No, that is not what I am saying. I think Malefor was set up to being one of the greatest, if not the greatest villain in all of Spyro, and yes, I am including the original trilogy, and I am heartbroken that what could have been easily a slam dunk for the franchise becomes a miss and doesn't quite pull it off. I know he shows up in a comic for Skylanders and even shows up as Cinder's dad in Skylanders Academy, but none of them hold a candle to what could have been with his role in The Legend of Spyro. Now, if you're wondering, how did they do such a good setup with the first two games and then botch it in the third? Well, I think it's the most likely culprit is the fact that Chrome, the studio who actually developed the first two games, did not develop the third, as it was developed by a French team named Astrange La Balure, which is another rabbit hole that I don't have time to cover in this video, but if you're interested in me talking about it, let me know in the comment section below. But who knows, maybe Malefor will come back as a future bad guy in the new Spyro trilogy. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.